Welcome back to another episode of the Muscle Room Podcast. We are here in the brand new, beautiful Nassau County Police Department training facility / academy and intelligence building. This is my first time here, and it's beautiful. I've seen photos of it, and I know it's only been open for a few months now, about a year or so.
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years now. You have an academy class going through right now. You got a lot going on, and it's a phenomenal place. And we are joined, for those of you who are watching, you've already have seen him. For those of you that are listening, we are joined by the one and only Pat Ryder, Nassau County Police Commissioner, a huge supporter and friend of Law Enforcement Officers Weekend, and now to the Muscle Room Podcast. Pat, welcome aboard, and thank you for being here. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and welcome to my house.
Thank you. Yes, a beautiful house, by the way. What time's dinner? Again, we truly appreciate it. We've now shot 2 other episodes, and there'll be a 4th one later today here. And thank you for your hospitality. We truly appreciate it. This has been a episode that we've been looking forward to. I believe that you're probably the highest ranking acting member of service that we've ever had on the Muscle Room Podcast thus far.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So unless we get, I don't know, if we get maybe a congressman or the president, you're probably going to be the highest person thus far.
I know a congressman that might be willing to do it.
Anthony, we're looking at you specifically. We were actually just talking about maybe during Police Week, trying to interview him, because we'll be going down and doing a bunch of stuff there.
Okay.
So looking forward to it. With that being said, again, welcome to the Muscle Room Podcast, and we're going to just jump right into it. So the police commissioner for Nassau County Police Department, one of the largest police departments in the country. I want to know everything from A to Z, why you became a police officer and how you went from police officer all the way to police commissioner.
Well, so we are the 12th largest in the country. We have 2,540 sworn members. I got a brand new class of 50 that's going to graduate in about 7 weeks. And I got another class of 50 going in on the middle of May. So we keep the hiring process going. We got to keep this building filled and doing it that way. My parents immigrated to this country from Ireland, and every Irish kid grows up with a lot of history of what, coming to America is about. And when the first Irish came to this country, the sign would be out there, no Irish need apply. And from there, the only jobs that were available was law enforcement. So they started to hire a lot of the Irish to go into law enforcement. It became tradition in families to be part of the law enforcement family, to be part of the FDNY, the NYPD. So when the test came out, I was bouncing around, looking at jobs, working a couple of different places. I took the test, scored very high. I got hired in the first group that came out of my test. And my class was about 2,100 people in the NYPD. So I went on January 4th, 1984. All I could think about was being a cop. And growing up with it, I had an uncle, Jimmy Cohn, a good friend of mine. His son was the commanding officer over at aviation for the NYPD. Jimmy's now retired, living in Florida. His brother Danny went on. His family had it. My family, my brother Jimmy was on, who's now retired out of highway, suffering from a lot of 9/11 issues. My brother Michael was on for a while. And all my friends, it was the job to go to at the time, growing up in a village of Limerick. So I did. I joined it. Loved it. Went through 6-7 months at the police academy, rolled out of there, went to the 71st Precinct in Crown Heights, a very divided community. And I tell this story all the time. I get to the 7-1, we get read a roll call, we get, a break-in day, and then the next day I come back, it's a nighttime, it's in the summer, it's hot, I think it was like a Friday afternoon, and the lieutenant goes, okay, you're assigned to a fixer on President and Nostrand. So you're gonna walk out, there's no ride there, there's nobody jumping in the car, getting on a bus, you're gonna cut through the alley across the way, you'll end up, when you get to Nostrand Avenue, make a right, and you'll get up to President Street, You'll be a 1-block area. Across the street, there was nobody, but on an angle of each corner, there was another cop at those fixes. You're not allowed in any places. Everything was a numbers joint, as they said it, but it was really a crack joint. The only thing that was open there that was comfortable to stand in front of was the pizza place, right? I walk out the door. I cut through the alley. I got dogs growling at me. I got homeless people. Everybody's using crack. They were stoned out. And, it was kind of nerve wracking as I'm walking through it. And then I get out to the other side and I get out to Nostrand Avenue. Mobbed. Now it's about 6 o'clock at night. And I mean mobbed. There was people everywhere. They're on there. They're playing backgammon. They're drinking, out on the street. They're smoking marijuana when marijuana was illegal. It was a nerve-wracking thing. I tell people all the time, I saw my first Rastafarian. The only Rastafarian I ever seen was on a Bob Marley album, right? So I was just uncomfortable. I was, typical white kid from Long Island. And all of a sudden, you're in a different community, and my father gives me the best advice here. So I get up to a corner, I stand there, I go over to the payphone. I take a dime out. People don't remember this. I put the dime in, and I dial the rotary phone, and I call. My father answers at home. He goes, "How you making out?" I go, "I'm a little nervous." And he goes, "Tell me." I go, "Dad, this is what and I went through that scenario I just told you." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "Relax, take a breath. What day of the week is it?" "It's Friday." "What time is it?" I go, "It's about 6:30. Dad, I told you, why are you asking me these questions?" And he goes, "It's Friday at 6:30. It's a hot summer day. What are you doing on Long Island if you were home right now?" "Well, I'd probably be in the backyard having a beer, or I'd probably go down and meet my friends for happy hour." And he goes, "Okay, it's happy hour. They're home. It's a Friday. Look around. Do you see air conditionings in windows?" And I looked at, these were all 3-floor flats. And I'm looking in and you see the fans in a window. The windows are all open. And he goes, "There's no air conditioning, right? So they're out in the street to be cool. They're drinking a beer like you'd be drinking a beer." He goes, "I'm glad you're not smoking marijuana, but it was, again, acceptable for the community, and they're all hardworking people." He goes, "Do you see a backyard?" I go, "What?" He goes, "Do you see a backyard?" I go, "No, the backyard's a 3x3, right?" He goes, "Of course not." He goes, "This is the community. This is what they live in." And he taught me my first lesson in understanding cultures, understanding difference, culture being a different neighborhood, never mind race and religion, because on the other side of Eastern Parkway was one of the largest Orthodox Jewish communities and growing dramatically by the day in the community. So you got a divided Crown Heights, and I think it was Kingston Avenue at the time, divided the two sides, right? Caribbean, African American on one side, Orthodox Jewish, Hasidic Jewish on the other side. And again, I grew up in Limerick, and it was pretty close to I went to school with a lot of Jewish kids, but not Hasidic Jews, and it's a different type of Jewish faith and trying to understand it. So he gave me that lesson and said, "Look, accept it. It's okay." And I got comfortable. And then an hour and a half later, a call comes down at, I think it's 1096 Prospect Avenue. I'll never forget it. Woman being assaulted. I turn my head, I look down the corner, and there's a woman being beaten by a man. But I'm on a fixer, and I'm told you don't leave the fixer. You stay on your fixer. I look twice, I look 3 times, and I just run down the block. I end up pulling the guy off the woman. Anti-crime shows up. They grab the guy, they put him in handcuffs. They throw him in the back of the car. The bus shows up, the ambulance. They take the woman to the hospital, and they drive in. The kid get in the car, and they drive me into the station house, into the 7-1. I walk up to the desk. They go, "Hey, you want the collar?" I'm stupid enough to say yes. "Yeah, I'll take it." And then I get in there by myself with a prisoner, and the desk officer says, "Oh, you took the collar, huh?" "Yeah, you're an idiot." And I just start getting yelled at by the lieutenant. Then I go in, I bring him inside, and then I got the sergeant comes in, and then my FTO officer comes in. Then the lieutenant from upstairs comes in. Everybody's yelling at me. "You don't even know how to process an arrest. You got it. What do you?" Oh my God. I said, "Yes, I sit down, I'll figure this thing out," right? And then the XO of the precinct walks by, and I never met him before, taps me on the shoulder and says, "Kid, it'll get better." That was Ray Kelly.
Oh, wow.
And Ray Kelly was there, and I went and told him this story 30 years later when I saw him with Congressman King at his house for Christmas time. And I told him the story, and he goes, and he had a memory. He starts naming people that worked in the 7-1 at the time. And I'm like, "Commissioner, no disrespect. I don't remember these guys, but I remember that day, and I remember what you did to me. And I've never had a fear of jumping in with 2 feet ever after that day." I said, "Hey, it'll work out." And it did. It worked out that night. I made some overtime. I didn't know what central booking was. I learned right away. So it was all good.
Wow. That's an incredible story for your first essentially day on the job.
Yep.
That's fantastic. And I think it's actually a really good takeaway. So many men and women from Long Island become police officers in New York City. It's a I don't want to call it a stepping stone, but it's the largest department, of course, in the country. So they hire so many of us, and I could almost say the same exact story. Being a white Jewish kid from Long Island, working my first 7 years in Harlem, eye opener.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that resonates with so many of our listeners. So you start off in the NYPD. How long were you in the NYPD before you went over to Nassau County?
So I went from the 7-1 over to the 7-9. I did another year and a half in the 7-9, so 2.5 years. I get a call one day that you're going to start July 18th in the 1986 in the Nassau County Police Academy. I basically tell my father, I'm not really sure. My father goes, no, you're going to take the job. You're going to take, and all I really wanted to do was be a Limerick cop at the time when I was a kid. Now I got a taste of the NYPD, and I still think it's one of the greatest in the world. And I was deciding to whether to leave or not. And he told me, he goes, listen, come out here, quality of life. You're closer to home. Your family's here, blah, 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 blah. But I'm this Irish kid who grew up is in the NYPD, and you've heard the streets of New York sang all your whole life, and here you are now being part of it. I don't know if I want to leave. Well, I left, and I left crying like a baby. They drove me home that morning after a midnight, and at the end of my midnight tour, I handed everything to the desk officer, turned the gun and everything else in. That day, because it was a night tour, the next day, I went in and I started the Nassau County Police Academy. And I'll never forget it. It was tough leaving, but when I got my first paycheck, I never cried again. So it worked out well.
Yeah. And then how many years were you a patrol officer in Nassau? And where'd you work? What was your?
So I came out here. I went through the academy over in Williston Park. After the Williston Park, we went to I went to the third precinct right there, also in Williston Park. I had no hook. I didn't know nobody. Had no connections. The third precinct was the kind of area they was sticking a lot of the city guys because we had at the time. Newcastle was a very drug-infested community, which, by the way, has turned around, regentified, and really become a good community. Not that it wasn't a good community, but I mean, a lot less drugs involved in violence. And I went into the third, went into Newcastle as a cop, and then from car 315, and then I went into plainclothes in the precinct. And with a year and a half on the job, just under 2 years, the commanding officer called me and he goes, hey, I want you to go over to what we call BSO on this department, Bureau of Special Operations. So it's your ESU SWAT team. And I said, okay, I'd love to. I go, I get assigned to BSO. I'm in BSO for a while. And my commanding officer again called me up and said, hey, I want you to jump over this new narcotics team we're starting, NET, Narcotics Enforcement Team. Go to NET for a little bit. Promise you, if you ever want to come back, you can come back. I said, okay. I went there for about a year. Then I came back to BSO. BSO was the cool place. It's still the place to go on the job. And then I started studying. I just wanted to get my nose into the books. I studied. I didn't have college at the time, but I did have some awards that I got to give me a couple extra points. On my test, I think about 1,100, 1,200 people took it. I scored number 6.
Wow.
Now, I got to tell you, I was never a student. Mm-hmm. Never, ever, ever a student. I was usually on the bottom end of the list, not the top of the list. And I studied for a solid year in my basement with 2 guys with me, Mike Williams, now retired, Bobby Galgano, who's now the advisor to Commissioner Sewell. Mm-hmm. So Bobby and I were neighbors. We bought houses next to each other. And Bobby and I and Mike stayed in my basement, his house, all 3 houses. I had no kids, so we spent a lot of time at mine. And we studied. Bobby came out number 2. He's contesting. He should have been number 1. You could have that discussion with him one day, maybe. And Mike came also down about 100 out, and all 3 of us got made. All 3 of us went on to have good careers as sergeants. Bobby went on to be a lieutenant, narcotics, ran a CO of narcotics. I wish he stayed. He left a little early for me, but everybody makes their choices. But then it worked out for him. He's now working with the NYPD and doing a good job. as the advisor to the commissioner, and I think Commissioner Sewell's doing a fabulous job.
I agree.
So I made sergeant. I went to the 5th Precinct in Elmont. From the 5th Precinct in Elmont, I went over to the 8th Squad to be a detective sergeant. Detective sergeant for about a year. They asked me to go become the deputy commanding officer in charge of asset forfeiture. No intel at the time, just asset forfeiture. So I knew nothing about asset forfeiture. So I started to go back to school a little bit. I studied to get what's called my AFMILS, Asset Forfeiture Money Laundering Certification. I got the certification. We built our forfeiture, and then 9/11 happens. And on 9/11, and actually 9/12, I went down to Ground Zero for the first time, and I went with a group of Limerick cops because at the time I wasn't assigned for my job. I put the slip in. I said, I'm going down.
Oh, okay, wow.
Here's my slip, and I went. And I went with the Limerick PD. My brother-in-law, Billy Straub, was a Limerick cop. We went down to Ground Zero. We get there after handing out everything that was on the trucks and gave everything out. We get down there, and they handed you a helmet, a working's helmet, and they said, are you a medic? And I said, I'm an EMT, because all of the Nassau County used to be EMTs. They put a red cross on the back of your helmet, and they handed me a mask, a two-prong, the mask with the 2 filters on it. And to this day, I thank God I wore it a lot. I got on the pile, worked with a lot of the Limerick guys, and a good friend of mine, Gary Wall, Limerick cop, was there. He was filthy dirty. Gary, we just got here. How are you so dirty? And I didn't see Gary with the group that came in. And he goes, I've been here since yesterday. He goes, Glenn worked for Cantor Fitzgerald. That was his brother. Glenn was my best friend growing up. So that was my first connection to a friend that died in Ground Zero. And then he also said in that building also was Dennis Buckley, my neighbor, also a good friend growing up. And so both of them had lost and died in 9/11. And then many, many friends you find out over the next couple of days. I remember finding myself in one of the tunnels crawling around. The 3 toots from the horn, I didn't know what that meant. Screaming at by some guys, back out, back out. So we back out. My brother was there. He grabs me. We just start running. And I think it was World Tower 6, I think, was starting to shake and move. We ran, came back, started to rain that night, late that night into the next day, changed my clothes in some Burger King that they were giving out new clothes, put the dry clothes back in, and we got back in it. And so then I come back to the job, and from there, we started Intel. And I met Chauncey Parker. Chauncey Parker, director of R.E.A.C.H, also works for the NYPD. Chauncey said to me, he goes, hey, you need to start an intelligence center out in Nassau. There's something missing. This is the failure of 9/11, Intel. And I think we all know that. So Chauncey said, I want you to start your own Intel center. So we started what was called a R.E.A.C.H at the time. And we got it up and running, and we kept it under asset forfeiture. So we started with two cops who are now still with me today, Tommy Calvin and Jimmy Murphy. And what we used to have 2 people doing Intel, we now have close to 70 people doing Intel. And as this room that you're in this outside area is all the 70 people that work in what we call Intel. There's about 25,000 square feet dedicated to that. I learned a lot from R.E.A.C.H. I learned a lot from Tom Galati. I learned a lot from the NYPD. We shared a lot of ideas and suggestions, and we built it. And we now house 6 cops downstairs from the NYPD. We also house MTA. We have Department of Corrections. So I listened to what happened with the NYPD. And again, Ray Kelly deserves that credit for how he built it after 9/11 and got those outreach to those areas. I did it by bringing them in instead of going out. And we are part of many task force. So we built Intel. And then a new outgoing county executive at the time, Ed Mangano, had about a year left in his term. And I had done a lot of work. I raised a lot of money here in forfeiture, did a lot with Intel, lowered crime. And he, about a year out, he says, hey, I want you to be the deputy commissioner. I get a phone call. It's a Tuesday afternoon. The commissioner at the time, Tommy Crumpter, also a good friend, said, just left Ed's office. We're going to make you deputy commissioner. I go, I've heard this before, joking around. And he says, no, I really am. He goes, by the end of the day, there will be an order cut that will take effect. And this is going to be taking effect on January 4th. my anniversary date with the NYPD, my close of 32 years, starting my 33rd year, I would go in as the deputy commissioner. And I'm like, wow. I go, this really going to happen? He says, yeah. I said, can I tell my wife? So I called my wife. My wife didn't believe me. I said, you may not believe me, but here's what you need to do. Go to the bank, take out $1,000, meet me over in the Good Life in Massapequa, a good friend of mine, Paul, the owner. And I said, I'm bringing everybody in. I'm buying drinks. She goes, you're going to spend $1,000? I said, yeah, I'm going to spend $1,000 because you know what? I am just honored that I'm being asked. So we get to the bar and all my friends show up and, other people that were not your friends now all of a sudden they want to be your friends, right? Not just because you're buying, it's because you're going to be a deputy commissioner. And about the order came out about 9 o'clock that night and it was a good evening. So I start my career as the deputy commissioner and about 3 months into it, commissioner at the time, Crumpter, has a health issue. So he ends up being in the hospital and I get a phone call, says, listen, you're the acting commissioner right now until Tom's better. Okay. And I know at the end of the year, at the time, County Executive Mangano had finished his term. He was done. He wasn't running. There was a new election coming up, and it was going to be between Laura Curran and, at the time, a gentleman from Mineola. And they're gonna run. So I know it's over at the end of the year, but that's great. I'm going out as the deputy commissioner. Now the acting, at least for a couple of months, Tom comes back and says, I'm retiring. I took another job and I'm out in 30 days. So he basically gets healthy, thank God, and cleans out his office. Mangano calls me over. You are officially the acting police commissioner of Nassau County. And I got about 7 months to go at it. I get into my position, doing a lot of good stuff. I want to say, hey, I'm going to leave my mark on here. The election happens. The Democrat wins. I get appointed. I was appointed by a Republican. The Democrat wins, Laura Curran. And the rumors, I get a phone call and she says, look, we're going to give you 4 months. Figure things out. And when we decide who we're bringing in, we'd appreciate that. I go, I'm a professional, right? Trained that way in this department. I said, we will transition. We will be peaceful. And I said, I am just thankful for the opportunity. And so she said, okay, great, thank you. I find out about, a month into it, and still the time County Executive Curran was not sworn in. I find out that there's some people from the outside looking for the job, and I kind of get a little bug in me. I said, you know what? Why can't I be qualified for the job too? So I call, at the time, Richie LeBrun, my press guy, in, who's sitting behind us. And I also call in my community affairs lieutenant. I said, you get me to every synagogue, every church, every mosque, every community meeting, every community leader. I said, I need to get out there and get out there. So, and quick. And I got out there nonstop, 7 days a week, going. So it's Christmas time. She had not been sworn in, but she called me up. And I was at a DAI party at the Plateau. She'd never forget these things, right? And she says, are you going to leave? And I said, no, as soon as you tell me you got somebody. She goes, well, I'm not sure what I'm doing, but there's a lot of talk going. I already picked somebody. I have not picked somebody. I said, well, I appreciate that. I go, I understand something. I'm already cashed in my chips. I'm way ahead of myself. I'm good. I'm really, really good. And I'm very thankful for what I've been given. And I thank God and I thank you. And she turned around and she said to me, well, I haven't made my decision yet. So now I hung up the phone. I go, hasn't made a decision. Is she going, either way? And then I'm going at it again. And then I think it's a couple of days after her swearing, the night of her swearing in, the next morning, I have to wake her up in the middle of the night. Will Gomes, one of our guys, and this is the biggest moment of her life. She's getting sworn in as the county executive tomorrow morning. The governor is coming down to swear her in. And I got to wake her up and say, Will Gomes just was in a serious head-on accident while he was out doing DWI patrol, hit by a drunk driver. It took about an hour and a half to cut him out of the car. He's on life support, and he's over at Northwell Hospital. I'm on my way over there. I'll advise you when I get there. She goes, okay, keep me posted. She goes, Commissioner. And that's the first time she called me. She goes, what do I need to do? I said, look, there's nothing you're going to change now until you're swearing in. Go to that swearing in. But my suggestion, and I didn't have to suggest it very hard, is that as soon as the swearing is over, up to see Will. She goes, that's already in my mind. I'm already on my way in my head. She got it. She came up to the hospital. To this day, Will is still suffering, but doing a lot better, forced to retire. But it was a turning point in our relationship. And then 3 weeks later, I think it was, she called me up and she goes, I'm done. Do you want to be my commissioner? And I said, I was a little stunned. I was in staff and I walked out. They said the county exec's on the phone. And that takes priority. They're the boss, right? So I walk out and I take the phone call. She goes, do you want to be my commissioner? I go, excuse me? Do you want to be my commissioner? I'd be honored. She goes, okay, we're going to announce it tomorrow. She goes, don't say nothing to nobody. Don't go in the room. We're going to announce it tomorrow. Well, by the time I got back to the room, it was already leaked out, right? But that's business that we live in. Mm-hmm. And I served 4 years with her. And then comes in Bruce Blakeman. Now, totally different management styles. Totally different. Bruce Blakeman is a in-your-face type leader. Wants what he wants, knows what he wants, and wants it when he wants it. And he, in the beginning, we had some bumps because of me, right? And because I was just used to 4 years of basically run the police department, commissioner. If you got a problem, you tell me, but don't you dare think that you could make a decision without me knowing. I go, oh, totally understood and respected that. He comes in and he goes, I want to know what's going on. And every morning, I spend the first half hour of my day between 6 and 6:30 reading every case report that's gone on through the night and sending it to him, the ones that are important. So he'll probably get 10 emails in the morning from me, text messages with these cases. Then I'll roll back to the other side and, start reading the other stuff that I need to tell him. And during the whole course of the day, I'm texting him with new cases. When I'm out of this thing, I'm looking at the phone. And the only thing that's going to stop this interview is if that phone rings and it's Bruce Blakeman, because he's a hands-on guy. Someone says, hey, is it difficult? I don't know what you see. Is it my job? Yes. Is it harder? No, they were both hard in their own way. And I respected Laura Curran very much, and I respect Bruce Blakeman very much. But they're different managers. And I respected Ed Mangano. I liked his style. But at the same time, the job gets done. He's the boss. Don't forget that. Just like the mayor of New York City is the boss. And I know Keyshawn understands. She runs 30,000 police officers and another how many thousands of civilians. At the end of the day, if the phone call comes from the mayor's office, it's it. It's what the mayor's going to say, right? The same thing with the county exec. County exec is very respectful in asking first, tell me what it is, let me understand it, and then I'll make my decision. And that's all good. So that's where we are today. It's been just about a year and 5 months. And again, it's been some hard times. We don't forget, we went through COVID. We went through, I go back to 9/11 as a sergeant, but as a commissioner, went through COVID, unrest, police reforms, marijuana challenges, and now justice reform. And when you look at the changes, body-worn cameras, training, implicit bias awareness, understanding communities. And I always say this, if you understand the environment you police it better. Simple as that. Maybe that's a little broken windows understanding, but I'm not fixing everything if the community accepts that everything. And the community, back when I go back to that first day walking up Nostrand Avenue, some people smoking marijuana, nobody was complaining in the community. So what am I doing, right? And same to today. If a community accepts, a downtown bar area like they do in Farmingdale, a very successful downtown bar area, then the community accepts that. So what am I doing? Make it work. Find a way to make it work, keep them safe when they come there. So we do that now. And like I said, it's his style is different, but his style is understandable. He's the boss. Get it done. And we get it done. And that's why we're successful.
You've painted a pretty phenomenal picture for all of our listeners. You being the cop's cop that you are, also the top cop in Nassau County, how do you navigate being the top cop, but also in the political position of a commissioner? How do you work with the men and women of the Nassau County Police Department while also navigating the political realm? because as we all know, cops see the world in a very different light than most people because we see the worst of society. Politicians try to see everything in brighter tone per se. So how do you speak with your the men and women of the department while also trying to keep everybody in the political realm happy as well?
Doing this for now, I'm in my 40th year, right? So you see a lot of leaders, you see a lot of bosses. You take a little bit from everybody. I had this one lieutenant, Mike Fleming, who every time I went in and I thought I hit the goal, he'd raise the ladder and raise it again and raise it again. That makes you better. Nowadays, we don't want to challenge our kids too much because we don't want to offend them if they make a mistake. I think Denzel Washington has the greatest inspirational speeches I like to listen to over and over. And he always says that. He goes, if things were easy, we wouldn't get better. If things are hard, you're going to fail. You have to fail to succeed. Nobody goes out and runs the marathon in the fastest time. They train for it. So it makes you better. And, and hard work works. It's not easy to do. So I like to listen. I always thought I was a great listener. Growing up with my dad, he'd take me, I'd go painting when they were house painters, and I had my uncles and everybody else. And I'd the guy asked some questions, but I listened. Even to this day, if a senior cop or somebody walked into this room and wanted to talk to me, I want to listen because they got all this knowledge and experience and they tell you things. And it's like, oh, I could take that. I could take a little bit from Denzel Washington. I could take a little bit from Mike O'Leary, the retired homicide detective. I could take a little bit from Mel Kenny's manager styles, Don Kane, Sam Razi, all commissioners on his job. I could take a lot from Tom Crumpner's manager styles. But then you have to make them your own. And I'm a people person. I like people. I'm a hugger, which my wife yells at me all the time, you're going to get in trouble. I go, I'm not smelling nobody's hair. This is all right. I go, but I say hello to my cops. I'm bro hugging all the guys and I'm giving hugs to the girls and a kiss on the cheek or whatever it is. And maybe improper someplace, but I'll know if it's improper. I'll get that, feeling from them.
Yeah.
But my cops know when I'm coming down the hallway, I'm not going to pass a cop without shaking his hand. And to this day, I never got COVID. So I say this is God's gift to me to go out there and do that. I always ask cops how they're doing, how you making out. You good? That's the word I always say. You good? You good? You good? I'm waiting for someone to say, no, I'm not good, because I don't hear it on this job. And because we have been taking care of it. We build it from the bottom up. The minute I walked in police headquarters as the deputy commissioner, I said, I want to open up every door. Get the key, open up doors. What is this junk? What is this? What is this? Who is this woman sitting down here in the basement? She's the mailroom. You put a woman down here in the basement to do mail in this area where the ceiling leaks and everything else? Next day, I had her moved up to a nicer area, cleaned that room up, and made it a storage room. Started polishing floors. The woman's bathroom, when I walked in it was a lounge outside the bathroom. There's the old stove that hadn't been turned on in about 20 years, right? But in it was mouse traps because mice would come in. And then there was an old lounge that they used to have in the surgeon's office down the hall that they put in there and another screen that when they do urine tests, they would use this area. This is the woman's lounge outside their bathrooms. And the male's room was just as bad. So I immediately called in through a friend of ours who made a donation and fixed those two bathrooms up. We had a ribbon cutting, but we used toilet paper as the ribbon, right? But again, we brought everybody down, loudspeaker, everybody come down. We're having a ribbon cutting outside. We built a memorial park, but we just turfed it last week. And I can't have my employees come out and stand in mud while they're eating lunch. So we had it turfed. The tulips are all blooming. These little things is what makes employees happy to come to work. Mm-hmm. Never walk down the hall without acknowledging your employee. Always say hello. So I do that with politicians too. That phone rings, Republican. I'm a staunch Republican. Everybody knows it, right? And I got myself in trouble because I've been backing too much of the Republican Party, and maybe that's not where I belong. I have a personal belief. I have a personal style and stuff like that, ideology, if you will. But on the same point, whether that phone rings Republican or Democrat, the answer is always yes. Don't tell them no. Figure out a way to do it. I taught that when I built this Intel Center. I said, the customer calls, say yes. And if you don't know how to do it, hang up, ask somebody. We'll find a way, because if they don't get a good result, they ain't coming back. And I believe in that. And so treat your employees well. treat your community well. I've met so many. Every holiday, I'll get rabbis, imams, and priests calling me. I went to church Sunday, St. William the Abbot. I'm a St. Francis, St. William the Abbot, a little jumping back and forth, right? But there's a sergeant. There's a Father Fitzgerald over there who just gave one of the most moving masses to me. But 3-4 days ago, I was doing an iftar in our gym here with the county executive. And again, listening to speeches. Then I was down at the Long Island Islamic Mosque and during the ceremony there. Then I'm always in temple. I'm always visiting on the Sabbath, speaking to the community. They want to know they're safe and secure. And we got to present that. Our county exec just rolled out Operation Overwatch. And the idea of it was to send them more of a presence out there. Is it effective? I don't know. We'll find out. But will it give them a feeling of security? 100%. And that's what he said.
I saw last week. Yeah. I was driving over the Atlantic Beach Bridge, and I saw 5 or 6, marked RMPs with the lights on over by the plaza in Atlantic Beach. And I thought, it must maybe a robbery or something went down. So I hit up Chris Cayley from BSO. I said, Chris, what's going on? And he goes, no, it's just Operation Overwatch. And I went, what's that? And then he explained it all to me. And I've seen it now multiple times since then.
So it's a presence. Listen, does it give the bad guy a little thought? Don't do crime here. It might. We don't know. That only the long term will tell that.
Right.
Is it an expensive thing? Yeah, and the county exec knows that. And he says, but can you put a price on people's security and letting the safety how they feel? And I said, no, you really can't. So it's working. Right now it's working. And, we'll adjust, we'll amend it, but we'll sit down and we'll come up with new ways.
So going back to the whole intelligence bureau that you worked in and being that we're sitting here in the building, as you're very aware, today is the 10th anniversary of the Boston bombing. And I'm not sure if you've watched the Netflix special that just got released recently. It's a phenomenal, multiple part series. And they interview the police commissioner at the time of Boston PD and the head agent in charge of the FBI. And they talk a lot about the intelligence sharing, or sometimes the lack thereof. Being the police commissioner in one of the largest police agencies in the country, and being the neighbor to New York City, the number one terror target in the world, what's it like collecting so much intelligence, and how do you decipher it?
So we run an intelligence-led policing model. That's our model, right? The effective and efficient use of your resources driven by the data. But we're not just counterterrorism, and people get caught up on counterterrorism. The NYPD does a phenomenal job, and that's why we have 6 of their members that are assigned here, because we know that relationship and we need that relationship. And again, Tom Galati's leaving, I think, this Friday.
Yes.
It's going to be a big loss to the NYPD, but there's always going to be someone that'll step up, and do the job. So all that information, if you got to invest in it, you got to invest in intel. And that's why we have 70 people that do it. For a department our size, that's very big. Tom Dale left as your chief of support for the NYPD. He came out here and became our commissioner. I worked directly as the sergeant. I answered directly to the commissioner of police, right? I ran the money and the intel, so you answered to the commissioner. And he calls me up the day of the bombing. He says, Patty, what are we doing? So, well, boss, we're gathering intel. We're talking to NYPD. He goes, no, what are we doing physically? What are we doing? So, well, we're tightening up, security. We think it's innocent. No. What are we doing for Boston? I said, I'm not understanding what your question is. He goes, are we sending anybody there? I go, that's not what we do. It's not really our place, right? And he goes, I want somebody to go there. I go, boss, it's not really. I go, Patty, I want somebody to go there. Send somebody there. All right, boss, you got it. And, I got along very good with Tom Dale. I hung up the phone. I called 2 of my good friends that worked for me, Billy Barry and Paul Rassio. I said, go home, get a couple of pair of underwear, pack your bag, and start driving to Boston. He goes, where are we going? I go, you're going up there for the bombing. You're going to get intel up there. Where are we staying? I don't know. Who are we meeting? I don't know. I said, but I got 3.5, 4 hours to figure this thing out.
Yeah.
Just start driving. So they did. They drove up there and they went to the Brick. The NYPD, who we made a connection to them, greeted them, got them into a hotel right across the street from where the bombing was. That was where most law enforcement was staying because it was safe. And then they would go into the briefings and get some information. Not all of it, but what they did was they welcomed us and they shared what they needed to share, the need to know basis. People have to understand that. Sometimes there's not a need to know. Hey, listen, you're going through that with the leaks right now. of that 21-year-old kid who leaked all that stuff out, right? So sometimes we don't need to know. I got my top secret clearance, right? And most of my guys did not. So I would say to them, listen, you don't need to know it. If you really did, we'd have to work something out with you and we'd have to get that information to us. But the FBI knows that what they're feeding out, they have to be careful. But on the other side of it, there's a lot of law enforcement agencies, and you saw the movie, piling into that room. Give me, let me go. We want to answer this. Sean Collier gets shot and killed, and then the other officer dies later. Mm-hmm. But it was like this. If he had known, would it have prevented the shooting? I don't think so, right? And I'm never going to Monday morning quarterback anybody's decision because I have to make my own.
Yeah.
So, but Intel, we have an open door policy here. If you're good with me, I'm good with you. That's why the NYPD, Suffolk County, Rodney Harrison, doing a great job out there. We have a partnership that he knows. He picks up the door. He gets stuff. I can tell you this without giving up any secrets, but they needed information regarding the beach murders, right? And they needed it to done, and so we did it. I'd probably say several hundred hours worth of work. What is it about? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I didn't ask. Why not? Not for me to know. They need it. They get it. I said, and Rodney has been very gracious with us, and we provided them what we get, and they've come back. We provide it. So intelligence sharing, and Chauncey Parker said it that day on the pile. It was the building right next door, and he says to me, he goes, if we're not sharing information, what are we doing? He goes, isn't that the idea of it? We were brought up as cops to keep everything in your back pocket because if I get the shooter, I look better than you.
Right.
But if you get shot because I didn't tell you about the shooter, well, that's on me now, right? And that's a heavy burden to carry. And we teach that to our cops. We have a thing called real-time intel, in-your-face intelligence. Whatever you want, you can get it at your fingertips, just like the NYPD can. And we're putting it now on our phones, in the cars, and everything else. And the objective of the purpose of this is that we can get intel out there that nobody can question and say, now, are there times that robbery squad calls up and asks for something done that I won't share? Absolutely. Homicide? Absolutely. A precinct squad guy? Absolutely. Because sometimes you can't share it. But if you conflict, we have to tell you. And that's why we have that deconfliction database. Again, thank you, NYPD and HIDA. But that deconfliction database puts people together and says, hey, I'm looking at the same guy you're looking at. We can either discuss this, we can go our separate ways, but we're probably going to crash. And that's what solves a lot of our problems because of deconfliction.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. We were talking about this prior to you coming into the room in the Boston bombing. And, with the FBI and the city of Boston not wanting to release information at a certain time. And there were pre 9/11 or even since post 9/11, a lot of agencies tend to try to, like you said, keep information from one another because they want to be the head honcho. But clearly that's not happening here in Nassau. And I think that's phenomenal. So we have listeners from agencies across the United States. So hopefully if you are in one of those agencies, hopefully they'll learn something from what you just said.
Listen, we all learn from each other, and I hope that message. We can't keep it in our back pocket. Those days, I'm not walking a footpost in Bed-Stuy right now. I'm sitting in an intel center with a whole bunch of information that can make somebody a whole bunch better.
Yeah. Now I know we're kind of getting towards the end of the podcast. Where do you see law enforcement within the next 10 years or so?
So we went through, obviously, the death of George Floyd and police reform. Then, first came justice reform, then came the COVID, then came police reform because of the death of George Floyd, then came, all these other justice reform and so forth. So policing's gotten better. We're not perfect. People have to realize we are not perfect. We deal in a world of nothing but, most of the time, hostility, right? People angered, people upset, people that want answers that we can't give them all the time. But they come to us, whether it's delivering that baby, running into that fire, because we are the first responders at a fire, right? Whether you're running into that fire, you're delivering that baby, you're locking a shoplifter up, you're doing a homicide, a robbery, a rape, a kidnapping, all of the above and many, many, many other things. We become the social worker. We become the family counselor. We do all of that. And that's why we're so good at it, because a family counselor may not deal with a family issue for 2 weeks. We deal with it every day. Every day we go to a domestic, our cops out there. So they get very, very good at what they do. Policing changed, that became more community-based. We're building an entire village in the back. We're not calling it a tactical village. I don't want to take the word out of it. Call it a training village. Is there tactics? Of course there is. Everything we do is tactical, right? But we want the mentality to be, the mode when you come in is, we're training you for the village. We want you to understand the community you police. We want you to understand that's a mosque. No, now it's a synagogue, or now it's a church, or that's a school over there, that's a homeless guy on the track, that's a gas station that just got robbed, but you have a language issue, a language barrier, big challenge in today's society. How do you use the tools that we're giving you and put you in those scenarios? So policing gets better. We are definitely on a downswing, and I think we're going to start turning it back up. Thanks to a lot of our politicians have taken that word, defund the police, out of their dialogue. Right? They don't even want to say it. It's like poison for a politician to say that. And when those who say it, they're not thinking rational. They really are not. Policing today has to be supported. But policing has to get better. We have to do better, right? We can't have situations that we've had over this country. You can't have an Operation Scorpion and you beat some guy down in the street. That can't happen, right? I asked somebody and I said, I'm always concerned. And I said to one of my cops, he goes, boss, it won't happen here. I go, why are you so positive it won't? And I believe him too, but why are you so positive? He goes, because we've got too many good cops that won't allow a bad cop to do that. And you don't know, you weed out, you go through a hiring process, you want to hire the best, but now they're saying, well, you got to lower this standard, or you got to lower that standard. And this has nothing to do with race, religion, gender. Absolutely nothing. I can show you the best female cops, the best African-American cops, the best Hispanic cops, the best white cops. I can. And my cops across the board do an excellent job. But we have to do better understanding the cultures, understanding the ethnicities, understanding the religions. And look, gender, transgender, David Kilmick, I speak to David probably once a month. He's the head of the LBG community out here. And, he's got ideas and visions that, okay, I can listen. We should listen. Like I told you in the beginning, I'm a good listener. And sometimes I'm just like, that'll never work. That doesn't belong in law enforcement's thought process right now. But we can learn from that. Maybe we can add something. We can change it. I bring in a transgender woman who comes in and teaches to our recruits so they understand. But I also bring people from the Latino community, the African-American community, all across the board. And I want the Jewish community, the Muslim community, and they come and they speak to our cops. Comfortable with people. If you become more of a people person with good sound tactics, we won't have problems. If we understand environments with good sound tactics, you won't have problems. And I say this, people, we don't shoot nobody in Nassau County. We very rarely fire our weapons. Do we use a taser? Yeah, we do. But you know what a taser is? It's a preventive of using a weapon. So, and it doesn't hurt somebody. It just stuns them for the moment to get them under control. And then people don't understand, why is it 10 cops to arrest that person? And I just said it this morning at a class I was talking at. Because if that person does not want to be handcuffed, it's not going to happen. But how do I give the perception that I'm in control and I'm not beating this guy that the people see on the media? Because people like to pick and choose little stories. Well, we have to get down into it and try to get better ways to control, better ways to understand, saying the right things, not using the improper language. This is all part of a training mode. We are constantly training, whether it's from the level of a supervisor on the street or the academy here.
Fantastic answer. Couldn't agree more. I do believe that we are on the upswing, or the pendulum is going to start swinging in our direction in law enforcement. Can't get much worse, because if it were to, which I don't think it will, you're not going to have a police force to patrol to begin with.
I just left the state police, and they got a massive hiring going on. New York State Police, great agency, looking to hire. Those out there, they're hiring. NYPD hiring. Nassau County gives a test next year. We're hiring. So it's back, and it's a great, proud profession. You can't intimidate me about any job saying, oh, you wouldn't want to work there. If Chicago PD wanted me to be a cop in Chicago PD, I'd be a cop if I lived in Chicago PD.
Yeah, everyone's hiring. Everyone's giving us incentives now. NYPD just got a phenomenal raise, raises across the board everywhere, every state, every country. Well, not every country.
Well deserved.
Yeah,
Well-deserved raise.
Definitely well deserved. So I do think that we're definitely on the upswing. Last thing I want to do, we ask all of our guests to do this. We ask them to bring something that represents who they are as an individual. And I see you have two things of NCPD swag right next to you. What do you got for us?
So if we weren't so cheap, I would have got you something better. But this is our hat with our logo, right? So we are not the NYPD, but we are the NCPD, and with our patch in the middle. Yesterday was our 98th birthday.
Oh, congrats!
In 2 years, we're hitting the 100-year anniversary. So again, this is a hat that we'd like you to enter, and we gave a water bottle. And a lot of these things that we give out to guests and visitors, just to take something home, put it on your shelf and say, hey, thank you. Remember Nassau County. You see it in bars all the time. There's patches that we're not supposed to give to anybody. Yep. They're in every bar in America.
Everywhere.
You know what? That's what we do because we trade things off. We're cops. We're about people and service. And this is so, again,
and this patch stands out.
Oh, yes, it does.
Not many patches have that color orange. So when you see it in a bar or a restaurant or wherever it's not supposed to be, it's right there in your face. Eye. Yeah, it definitely grabs your eye. I was at Kelly's Irish Times in DC last week for a meeting because we're planning a big fundraiser during Police Week with Leo Weekend. And the first patch, I'm not joking, the first patch I saw on their wall was a Nassau County patch next to a Suffolk and NYPD.
We didn't drink any beer there. We were just dropping a patch off.
No, just dropping a patch off and showing your support. So, Pat, any last words for the listeners?
No, yeah, I'd say this to you all. We are about protecting and serving. We took an oath, and we stand by that oath. We took an oath to our families that we're always never going to forget. But at the end of the day, we are just like you. We're men and women that leave their houses at the end of the day, kissing their loved ones goodbye, not knowing if they're coming home. In COVID, I used the example. Everybody was locked down, along with a lot of our first responders. We came to work and we took care of the sick. We'll take care of our victims. We'll always give them a voice. It's a difficult job, but it's an honorable job. And, I put my head in the pillow down at night and I pray for a couple of things. I pray for my family. I pray for my police family. And then I pray that I make the right decisions as it affects our communities. And those three things is what makes me, come at it every day. I'm in my 40th year. I don't know. I'll do another several years. We'll see what happens.
I hope you do. And I'm sure the men and women of the department hope you do as well. Pat, this has been a phenomenal episode. I really appreciate you coming on and trusting us and taking the time to sit down and hear what we have to say, and all of our listeners and viewers got to hear what you have to say. And this is probably one of my favorite episodes. I'm not going to lie. This was great.
Thank you very much.
So thank you for being a cop's cop, by the way.
Glad to be.
Last thing I'm going to say, and I'm not saying this because you're sitting here in front of me. I'm not the type of person to kiss the ring, but from the day that I met you, and from all the people, even before I met you, who said, you got to meet Pat Ryder. He's a cop's cop. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about you. Even the PBA.
Oh, there's a few. Yeah, even the PBA.
Even the PBA.
Maybe.
No, but it's serious. You are a phenomenal individual. Every time you come out to an event with Law Enforcement Officers Weekend, you're always there. You always give a fiery, great speech, and we truly appreciate you. You're a great friend to have.
You do the right thing in Law Enforcement Weekend. You give back. You give back to those families, to those cops. Anybody that's not part of it should be part of it. Those events should be mobbed because these cops and their families have gone through enough that we got to at least say thank you and give them some kind of a reward. I forgot to mention this. I'm actually wearing R.D. Lopez's shirt. I wore it on purpose knowing that I was coming here today. There you go.
So shout out to the Lopez family. They're, of course, part of our family as well.
I'm sure Charo's listening. Trust
100% she'll be listening to this. So, all right, Pat, again, thank you so much. This has been a great interview. And thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.